Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be making cheese raviolis today. So a lot of people don't know about this recipe and I have no idea why. I found this recipe scrolling through Pinterest one day and it has been my absolute favorite go-to recipe this entire keto journey of mine, and my husband absolutely loves this. Everybody I've shared this recipe with and have made it for absolutely love this. So let's go ahead and get started with these ingredients. I will say though, before we get started, this part is easy. These do take a little bit, but they are totally worth it in the end. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started with these ingredients. Okay, first thing you are going to need is 1 cup of almond flour, 3 tablespoons of coconut flour, 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar, 2 teaspoons of xanthan gum, a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. You can also use kosher salt. I just prefer pink Himalayan sea salt because I feel like it adds a little bit extra flavor, and 1 egg lightly beaten. Okay, so the recipe is going to call for you guys to use a food processor for this, but I find that my food processor over mixes the dough, and so I don't really like using it. So all you're going to do is you're going to take your coconut flour, xanthan gum, and your salt to your almond flour and mix that up real quick. Make sure it's well incorporated. And then you're going to take your apple cider vinegar. This is the part that can be a little bit tricky if you're doing this by hand, but you're going to slowly pour this apple cider vinegar into your dry ingredients, trying to get it well incorporated. I have been asked a lot why the apple cider vinegar and if you can taste it. You cannot taste it whatsoever. It's just a really good bonding agent for the dough. So I'm going to go ahead and start pouring this in. So I got that incorporated. And same for the egg. You're going to take your egg and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to slowly pour in your egg as you're stirring this with the other hand. So you guys can kind of see that my dough is starting to form. See that with the egg beaten in there, it has all clumped up. And now you are going to get 3 to 5 teaspoons of water. I don't normally ever go anything over 2 teaspoons. You don't want it to be super wet because then it's going to be very hard to work with. But you want it to be wet enough that you can stick the dough together once it's done chilling in the fridge. So I'm just going to try and scrape the rest of this dough out real quick. And now I have 3 teaspoons of water in here, but I'm going to go ahead and measure out 1 and 2. I kind of know this dough recipe pretty well because I've made it so many times, but definitely just start with 1 teaspoon and see how you like it and then go from there. I'm going to go ahead and pour the last teaspoon of water in there. Okay, so now you can see that when you grab this dough, you can easily form it into a ball. Perfect consistency. So now this part, super easy, all done. You're going to wrap this in cellophane and you're going to refrigerate it for 30 minutes before rolling it out and cutting it. So, I am going to go ahead and just grab some plastic wrap here and lay it out. And then just grab all this dough. Clump it all together. Roll it up. I had to take my rings off because the dough was starting to stick to them. And then just wrap it up really good. Grab some scissors real quick. So the recipe does tell you to let this rest for 15 minutes at room temperature and then put it in the fridge for 45 minutes. But to be honest, I'm impatient and I've never ever done that. But if you want to, you definitely can. I always just throw this in my fridge for about 30 minutes and then I come back and that's when I start rolling it out. I find that it's more sticky that way my dough is easier to cut. So as soon as this is done refrigerating, I will come back and show you guys how to roll it out. Okay, so now that our dough is chilling in the fridge, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to make the 3 cheese filling. I do mine a little bit differently, but not so much. I just do 1 cup of ricotta cheese. You're going to need 1 cup of either 1 cup of mozzarella cheese and 2/3 cup of Parmesan cheese, or I just use 1.5 cups of this Italian mixed cheese. And I also like to use 3 tablespoons of cottage cheese. You're also going to want salt and pepper to taste and 1 egg yolk. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So I'm going to go ahead and just measure out our ricotta. One cup of ricotta. The original recipe is going to be linked in the description below so that you guys can follow it to the T if you don't want to follow it the way that I make it. But this is just how I make it. This is how I would make a lasagna filling. So I just like the way it tastes a little bit better. So 3 tablespoons of cottage cheese. 1 cup of your Italian cheese. Then you are going to want 1 egg yolk. So, crack my egg. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mix this all up. Okay, so now I have my salt, I have some pepper, and another thing that I don't add, that is not in the recipe is I like to use Mrs. Dash Italian blend. So this is a blend of all sorts of Italian seasonings, and I found it just gives these raviolis a little bit extra flavor. Totally optional though, not necessary to use. I just sprinkle all of this in to taste. So pretty much this would just be eyeballing it. Once you get a hang of it, you kind of know what enough is. Pinch of salt. And just mix it all in. And there you guys go. Extremely easy, yummy cheese filling. So those are both done. My dough is still chilling. Once that's done, I'm going to come back, show you how to roll them out, show you how to fill them, and then we will cook them up. Hello guys, and welcome back. It's actually the next day. We decided that we didn't want to do raviolis yesterday, so I'm going to show you guys today how to roll out the dough. My dough's just been refrigerating overnight. I went ahead and put my filling in a container, and that was refrigerating overnight. I have let them both sit out at room temperature for a little bit now. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to get these rolled out. You're going to need 2 layers of parchment paper, about a 3-inch cookie cutter, your filling and your dough, and a spoon. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have found that working with parchment paper sometimes can be a pain. So what I like to do is get a damp washcloth and put that underneath, and it kind of helps with the slipping and sliding of your parchment paper a little bit more. So unroll our dough. And so I have this big ball of dough. I'm actually going to cut this up into 4 parts. It doesn't have to be even or anything. It just makes it easier to roll out in smaller sections. Okay, so you have your first bit of dough. Always just flatten it out a little bit. And this is where this is going to take probably the most of your time, is rolling this dough out. I actually tried putting this into a pasta roller, but because this is an actual pasta dough, it was more fragile and it just didn't work very well. So the best way I found is just to roll it out by hand. And so you want these to be fairly thin. You don't want them to be too thin that they rip, but thin enough that you can get the most out of it. I usually get these to the point where they're almost see-through. So. And you guys can see that that washcloth underneath is really helping this from moving so much around on my counter. Okay, so there's 2 ways of cutting this dough out. Oops. You can either take your cookie cutter, cut all the circles out and layer them together that way, or you can just take a whole piece, layer 2 pieces together, and then cut them out with your cookie cutter that way. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do it that way today. Normally I cut them all out individually, but I think that this way is going to be a little bit easier. This dough This dough is still a little bit too thick, so. Okay. So now I'm just going to go ahead and take my mix and a nice little spoonful. Oops, I have to move that. And layer that right on top. Doesn't have to be pretty because you are going to cut it out and make it look more like a ravioli. So this dough is pretty sticky, so you don't need any type of egg wash for the edges. It will just stick right to each other. Okay. And there you have it. Your first ravioli. Super simple. Like I said, rolling out the dough is probably the hardest part, and I would actually ideally like to have my dough a little bit thinner than this. So let's go ahead and just, I'm gonna move this out of the way. Let me try that again. So this is actually how I like my dough. So you can see it is pretty thin. You can see my thumbs through it, but it's not too thin that it's going to tear apart easily. But I have to say that this is almost exactly like regular ravioli. Like if you ever made true homemade ravioli, this dough feels just like the real deal. So, press that down. And cut it out. I like to use the scalloped side. So this side has the straight side and then the scallop side. I actually bought these cookie cutters at Walmart for a few bucks. But I like using the scallop side because it makes it a little bit more fancy. And voila! So pretty and so yummy. So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and go through, make all these raviolis up, and then I will show you guys how to fry them. so you see I have all of my raviolis rolled out. That took me about 10 or 15 minutes to roll all the dough out and fill them. I was able to get 14 out of this batch. I usually get anywhere between 14 and 16. I do feel that I rolled some of these a little bit too thick and some of them a little bit too thin. That happens, it's okay. One thing I will say though is, as you are frying these ones that are a little bit thinner, sometimes the cheese does get into the oil and it pops. So be aware that you might get popped at. I've been burnt a couple of times, but it's okay because these are really delicious. So now you're going to freeze these for 15 minutes before you fry them up. I'm only going to show you guys how to fry one of them tonight just because I'm saving these for dinner tomorrow. But that way it gives you guys an idea of how to do it. So once these are done freezing, I will come back to show you guys how to cook them up. Okay, so my ravioli has been in the freezer for a few minutes now. I'm going to go ahead and start my pan, put it on medium heat. And you are going to want to put olive oil into this pan. You can use butter, olive oil, avocado oil, anything that is obviously keto approved or low carb. Any of your choice is fine. But I like to put enough oil in there that it is going to come up and cover at least the midway point on your ravioli. So we're going to go ahead and let this warm up real quick, and then we're just going to fry a ravioli. You don't want to boil these because they will just turn into mush, but having them fried is honestly absolutely amazing. So let's go ahead and let that heat up, and then we will start frying. Okay, so you guys can see that this ravioli is a little bit torn up, which is totally fine. I just made it a little bit too thin there. So this cheese might come out and pop a little bit. So if you're doing that and you have this, just be aware of that. So my oil is nice and warmed up now. I'm just going to go ahead and sit that ravioli in there. These do not take long at all to cook. I normally use a bigger pan and get about 5 raviolis in here. But you just want these to be nice and golden, and then I just use a fork usually and I just flip it over. And you can see along the edges where it will start to brown up. And then I'm going to go ahead and just flip it. And just like that, you have a nice and browned up golden little cheese ravioli. These are seriously so good. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how I like to plate this. Okay, so as you guys saw, we have this nice little golden brown fried ravioli. I like to use Rayo's marinara sauce. And this is for half a cup, it is 4 grams of carbs and 3 grams of sugar. So this is probably the lowest carb like spaghetti or marinara sauce that you are going to find, but it's so delicious. It can be a little bit pricey, but you're not going to be eating these raviolis all the time, so to me it's totally worth it. So I just pour this on top of my ravioli, add it with some Parmesan cheese, have a little bit of a side salad with some ranch and stuff on top, and you are good to go. So if you guys try this recipe, please leave a comment down below. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.